Hello, thanks for joining the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs for our Wednesday webinar. I know it's just kind of letting people into the Zoom right now, so we've got a few little housekeeping things we'll do as we get started. But I'm Scott Cook. I'm the Communications Director here at SCDCA. I've been with the agency getting close to 3.5 years now. I've been the Communications Director for about 1.5 years, so we appreciate you guys for joining us. We do webinars every Wednesday, usually at 10:30 a.m. This week, we're going to talk about plan and respond, home repair, and emergency scams. So we know hurricane season runs from June 1st to November 30th, and the governor has declared this month as Hurricane Preparedness Month. So today we're going to kind of go over some things you can do to plan ahead and then respond to emergencies. And kind of some of the home repair stuff that we'll talk about throughout the presentation is also some stuff that kind of applies year round and throughout all kinds of situations when you may need a contractor and things like that. So, it'll be useful information, not just during an emergency or hurricane season or anything like that. And, we kind of also want to get into those emergency scams because we know a lot of times when these disasters happen, things are confusing, they're stressful, and that's kind of when scammers take advantage of those situations. So we're going to give you a little bit of information to help you prepare ahead. Two of the items that you should have available for download are our Beware of Disaster Scams publication and our Recovering from a Disaster guide as well. And they are going to provide a lot of information about things you can do after a storm. Some of it we will discuss. Some of it's a lot of other additional information that may be useful to folks. So we want to just make sure that's available to you. And of course, they're available on our website as well. And if you've downloaded those slides, you will also be able to click those buttons there, and they'll kind of download those or take you to the link on our website for those publications. And as we get going, I want to mention that there are some disaster case management events that are taking place. The South Carolina Office of Resilience has some of those underway, and they have kind of a mobile intake center set up, and they're still helping folks who were dealing with Helene from last year and need those recovery resources. So you should see those hours there on the screen. They shift depending on the day of the week. So please take note of that. And if you need additional information, you can go to scor.sc.gov. And again, that link will work for you there if you've downloaded those slides, but it's scor.sc.gov. And then they have another event that they're taking part of on May 20th. And the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs will also be at this event, along with emergency management and Department on Aging and a lot of other resources and different community groups. But that's going to be that senior prep event, and it's in Gaffney on May 20th from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. And again, you can click that link and get a little bit more information. And we have that available on our website as well. And of course, as we get started, we always have to do our disclaimer. The presentation is not meant to serve as a substitute for reading the various laws discussed, seeking legal counsel, or getting those interpretations on the laws we administer and enforce. The presentation is merely an introduction and overview to our topic. And as we get started, I'm going to get you our roadmap here. I'll give you a quick little overview of SCDCA, who we are and how we can help. Of course, we're going to talk about having a plan, and I'll give you a few little tips on things you might want to consider. And our big kind of chunk of our presentation will be hiring a contractor. Then we'll get into some of those imposter scams that happen from time to time after an emergency. And we'll discuss the red flags and some ways to protect yourself that will be free for you. Here's what we all came here for today, our plan and respond home and emergency scams. So we're going to get started with that first step. Of course, you want to have a plan. And one of those things is you want to kind of know your risks. So you're going to want to consider what types of water hazards may be around your house, wind hazards, of course. In that last round of storm, we had a lot of folks had to deal with wind damage, trees falling, things like that. And we kind of all were reminded that hurricanes don't just impact those of us along the coast. So you maybe want to take a look at your property and kind of figure out what those potential damages may be to your house, to garage, things like that. I know I've had a windstorm come through in my neighborhood and took out a pretty good chunk of a tree that fell in my garage a few years back. So, those winds can get us, even those of us who are, 100 miles in from the coast, even when there's not a, tropical storm or hurricane or anything like that. One of the big steps you can do is go ahead and look to see if you're an evacuation zone. And of course, that's going to mostly apply to those folks on the coast here. But if you've got our slides, this little link here will take you to the hurricane.sc website. And again, it is hurricane.sc. I know that's a little bit unusual or a little bit different, but if you look at this, hopefully you guys are able to see that right there. But it's going to kind of give you a lot of resources. And that first line is that know your zone. So they're all kind of labeled from A to F with that. And usually that's kind of, further inland would be, that F, and the A would be those coastal areas. But, when those evacuation orders are put in place, and a lot of times with the restrictions, they might impact, different areas, depending on where you are and how the county is set up and things like that. So just kind of make sure you know those evacuation zones. So then when emergency management officials are discussing, those zones, you kind of know if it applies to you or not. And that's going to be, a great way for you to stay on top of what might be impacting your immediate area. And of course, you want to have an evacuation plan as well. And that's going to help you out. So you want to go ahead and take a look at that and kind of figure out what's going on with your area and how you might go. A lot of the coastal areas do have specific evacuation routes that, folks are supposed to take. And again, that hurricane.sc website is going to be a great resource for you there. And a disaster kit, or, those emergency supplies, those are great things to go ahead and get. So you want to have non-perishable food, water supplies, medicine, maybe battery powered radio and flashlights, things like that. I know a lot of those kits now have the crankable radio that also charges your phone and things like that. So those are all great tools to have. And of course, anything that your pet may need as well. So you want to have that stored away and somewhere that you can get to easily, and you don't really have to think about it. I know I just got a kit last week at one of the senior prep events that they had here in Columbia at the fairgrounds. So they had some of those available, folks, and it had a lot of those things that we just talked about. So it had the water, it had a quick little meal thing in it, things like that. So it's a great idea to go ahead and get those things together, have it stored somewhere where you can get them easily. And a lot of times if you go on to some of the websites that are out there, there are pre-packaged kits already available. So you can kind of take a look at that. I know sometimes they're a big bucket full of things. So you can just grab that bucket and throw it in your car if you need to hurry up out the road, if the storm's coming through or whatever the case may be, and you need to leave your home. But those are good ideas to go ahead and get those things available. And of course, you want to kind of communicate all your plans with your family ahead of time. If you're the only person in the family who knows the plan, it's not a very good plan. So you want to go ahead and communicate with your family, make sure everybody knows kind of those steps you would take. And maybe if things are assigned to other family members where one person's in charge of one task and another person's in charge of another, you want to go ahead and have all those things kind of ahead of time written out, or at least you all have talked about it and you all kind of know what's going on. And now is also kind of a good time to go ahead and know what's on your insurance coverage, and of course, know those policies. And a lot of times you probably want to go ahead and start making those changes now if something's not kind of working out for you, if you think you need a little bit better policy. If you don't own your home and you rent, you might want to go ahead and think about renters coverage, right? So you want to go ahead and make those decisions. And the reason we say that is because a lot of times, especially if there's a hurricane already projected, some of those rules kick in with insurance coverages, and you may not be able to update your plans, in time with that storm coming through. So you want to go ahead, make sure you have adequate coverage now and you understand those policies. And you definitely want to make sure that you know all the deductibles that might go in place whenever something happens. And you also kind of want to make sure you understand what procedures you would take, how you would go about notifying them if something's damaged or destroyed, and kind of the things that they want you to do. So make sure you understand what their procedures are for all of those different forms that you would need and how you need to report that damage to them. And like I said, now's a good time also to consider flood insurance. Floodsmart.gov is a federal website, and it's going to give you a lot of information on flood insurance, and that's kind of a website that FEMA operates, and it's part of the National Flood Insurance Program. So if flood insurance is something that you're considering, you might want to go ahead and click that link, kind of learn a little bit more about those coverages that are out there. And kind of one thing that they show on that site is, it's not just coastal areas that deal with flooding. You can kind of go in those websites and kind of look around on their maps and see where flooding has been reported, kind of how often in your county even, because I know I clicked in on ours and looked at Richland County, and of course 2015 was that big year of the flood here. So those reports of flooding and those policies that were kind of used during that time, for 2015, you could see that giant spike there. So, you can go in and look at how flooding's been reported in your county as well, and that might kind of give you a better sense of what you might want to be looking at as far as flood insurance and things like that. So that's a great tool to take advantage of and at least kind of look at and understand. And we've got a little bit of information here. These are all kind of tips from the South Carolina Department of Insurance. And they recommend that you really kind of go in through your insurance policies and you understand everything, especially the replacement cost coverage. So your policy may set some limits, and guaranteed replacement is one thing you might want to consider, and it will pay the full cost to rebuild your home, even if the reconstruction cost exceeds those policy limits. So that might be something you want to take a look at least kind of understand your options there. They also recommend that you kind of periodically go in and have your home reappraised, and have a policy that kind of reflects that real replacement cost. So again, you kind of want to know what the home's appraised at now and what it would actually cost to replace things. And you also might want to check for windstorm or hurricane deductibles. I know, like I said earlier, I had a big chunk of a tree fall on a garage at my property a few years back. And since that was a windstorm that caused those problems, the deductible was a different amount than, some of the other things that my home insurance covers. So, it was a little bit more expensive because it was considered wind damage. So just kind of go through, look at those things, and kind of understand that those deductibles may be a little bit different depending on circumstances. So you want to go ahead and take a look at those types of things and understand those policies. And we always tell people you kind of want to make sure that you're keeping all your records in a safe, dry place, of course. But one of the things you might want to consider is making a list of things that you have and taking photos of all those things. And that way you'll be able to provide it to your insurance company in case something goes wrong. So we also mentioned, like I said, having a safe, dry place to store some of those documents. You may want to keep copies, maybe at a work office or somewhere in a different location that obviously you want to put those things somewhere that you trust and that you're able to kind of keep safe. So just kind of keep that in mind too if you're making copies of important documents, but you want to be able to have somewhere dry and somewhere kind of safe and protected from, all those storm damages too as well. And one thing that you might want to look at too, a slide kind of advanced on me there and went back, but you might also want to kind of take advantage of technology. So there may be insurance inventory apps. So if your insurance company has an app that might have a thing in it where you can go in and kind of store a lot of those photos and those records of purchases and things like that, especially those big items that you want protected or kind of covered by your policy. So take advantage of that. If you have a cloud, you might want to go ahead and put some of those documents and records into the cloud app, right? So you can go ahead and save all that stuff. So you're making that a backup. But you might also want to put some of those things on a flash drive. So if you've got a lot of photos, a lot of, PDFs of some of those important documents that you have, you might want to just go ahead and put those on a physical flash drive. And then again, you put that somewhere else. Maybe not in your home, but somewhere else that's safe and somewhere else that, if your home is damaged or destroyed, you've got that backup ready to go. So you have those lists. But like I said, again, you might want to even go through your insurance company. A lot of them will have apps that store those photos and things like that. The National Association of Insurance Commissioners has a home inventory app as well that's available on Google and Apple app stores. So you might want to go ahead and take a look at that. That's the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, and it's a home inventory app. So that may be a good resource for you as well. And I kind of recommend some of these links. If you're like me, you get tired of Googling around, but if you've got these slides, they'll provide you a lot of good resources from the Department of Insurance. All these links on this slide kind of go to them. The first one's going to go to their main website. And they've also got a home preparedness checklist that's kind of lengthy, and it covers a lot of things that you might want to review on your policy. And it's a pretty good guide to kind of figuring out what you might want to do before hurricane season gets underway. And then that bottom link was something that was particularly helpful for folks back after Helene, I think, but it kind of gives you a lot of those contact numbers for your insurance company. So that might be something good to go ahead and save maybe on your phone or something like that. So you can just kind of click in that, and it's going to give you all those assistance numbers for all those claims, things like that. So you should be able to click on that, and it will give you a pretty good link for being able to get in touch with those folks. And again, all that's going through the South Carolina Department of Insurance and their website. I've got a couple of other quick links here. I already mentioned the hurricane.sc a little bit ago. That's a pretty great one for South Carolina Emergency Management Division. Kind of also recommend, kind of making sure you keep in touch with your local emergency offices as well. A lot of times, your county might have a different emergency channel. So make sure you're following all of them on social media, things like that. That hurricane.sc website, that's going to give you a lot of those hurricane guides. Sometimes you see those in paper form around at drugstores and things like that. They may have those. I know we do have that at those senior prep events as well. A lot of times SCEMD will bring those out. So all that information is available on hurricane.sc. So that's a great resource. South Carolina Department of Public Health will have a lot of information, not only about shelters, but assistance with medical needs, such as oxygen tanks, things like that. So if that's something where you have specific medical needs that may kind of get, I don't want to say ramped up during an emergency, but maybe pretty urgent for you to deal with, you might want to go ahead and take a look at the Department of Public Health's website and get some of those details from them. The Department of Environmental Services, they have a lot of information on indoor mold. I know that's a lot of things that we deal with kind of after some of these storms and emergency. So you might want to go ahead and take a look at their indoor mold information, just kind of get a good idea about things you might have to do, if you have mold that ends up developing in your home after a flooding situation, and some of the options that you might have to take care of. And of course, NOAA has a lot of information as well on their hurricane prep site, and that's going to give you a lot of details. So, you can take a look at that, and that will be a great service for you as well. All right, and before we get going, I'm going to try to see if anything has popped up here in my Q&A. Somebody said, can you please post the PDFs again? We can try to do that here again. It looks like we already did. So I see somebody said, thank you for that. So appreciate that. And again, I'll try to jump in again here in a few minutes too, as we change topics from time to time. But now as we get going, we kind of want to get into that contractor part of the presentation. So, one thing we saw after Helene was a lot of people in our state had to hire a contractor. And a lot of times it was somebody that they maybe weren't that familiar with that was coming in to repair that damage. And the reason for that was just so many of the contractors, had a gigantic order of business that came to them. So I know I had a couple of family members in the upstate who had to hire, contractors to do some work on their home. And it wasn't always the person that they normally dealt with, because all those people had, schedules and things that just got really bogged down after that storm. And a lot of other, companies had to come in and help that out. So, while I say that, you might want to just go ahead and get those lists of contractors that you normally deal with. So that way, when those emergency situations, you can call them kind of right away. The example I like to use with this is, if you've hired a roofer before, or an electrician, or, somebody who's helped you move, fallen trees or cut limbs down, things like that, you might want to just go ahead and have all those things in your phone and have a way to get a hold of them ahead of time, and at least kind of know who you would start calling, kind of where those go. And in some cases, your insurance company may have those preferred people too as well that they want you to go through. So, anything you can do to kind of get ahead of that is a good idea. But here's some few things to kind of keep in mind as you start looking at making repairs potentially, or hiring a contractor, just even, general way life goes if you need to hire somebody. So kind of the starting point that we kind of recommend is, of course, getting references, friends, neighbors, coworkers, anything like that. So you want to kind of do that research ahead of time. And kind of know who your friends and coworkers and neighbors have dealt with and see what they think about them and see if they would recommend them, right? So that way you at least kind of know the type of work that they've done and you know if they're easy to work with or not. And we also always say do your research, right? So you want to kind of go online, see what other people were saying about it. You can do that on social media, or you can kind of go to your search engine platforms, but you probably want to look at the name of the business, maybe put the word complaint after it, or you can put the word scam after it and just kind of see what comes up with that. A lot of times just searching online real quick, kind of give you a good idea of how that person does, how they respond to different complaints that might be out there. One thing you might also want to do is kind of look at some of the review websites that are out there. There are plenty of those. So as you get looking, just kind of keep in mind all those types of things and kind of see what other folks are saying about those businesses. It's always a good idea, of course, to get multiple estimates whenever possible. Kind of the recommendation is getting 3 written estimates anytime you have those big projects that you want to do. And that would kind of help you be able to kind of get a general idea of what those costs are going to be. And hopefully they're all somewhat similar whenever you start to get all of those. But as you're kind of talking to these folks, you also kind of want to ask them about what licenses they have. A lot of contractors have to license with the Department of Labor Licensing and Regulation. So that's the state agency, but there might also be different requirements in your county or your city that require them to have a permit for the type of work they're doing. So, now's a good time to kind of look at what your county or your city requires. And if you're looking at different businesses to do that work, you may want to make sure that they have the proper permits to work in your city or county, because if they're not, permitted in that county or that city, they may not be able to come and, perform the service for your home. And you also kind of want to ask them about their insurance, make sure they have, some kind of proof of insurance that they can show you or point you to. A lot of them will have some of those details on their website. Sometimes it seems like, but getting that insurance or proof of insurance from them is a good idea. And that might, protect you later on down the road in case something goes wrong. And before you start those repairs, again, this is kind of a good tool, and I'll click on this here in a second, kind of show you how it works, but it's the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs, our background of business page, and that's going to kind of give you access to look at some of those licenses with other state agencies, and you can kind of look at our complaint system too. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of click that link, and it should kind of show you up here. So you'll see there under the licensee lookup, you'll kind of see the links that go to a lot of those different state agencies as well. So you can kind of go to whatever the proper place is. That Department of Labor Licensing and Regulation is probably the big one for contractors that you would be dealing with in a situation like this. So you want to go ahead and just take a look at that. And then of course we have the search complaints portal. So you can go ahead and click in there, and that will open up our complaint database. So you should be able to click in there, and if you know the name of the company, you can just type their name, and then that's going to give you information about complaints filed with our agency, and you'll be able to get a summary, kind of what the issue was potentially with the business, how many complaints were filed, and kind of big thing, how they responded as well too. So if somebody's responding favorably to those complaints, that might be a sign that they're a good business to work with, or at least they're going to kind of reply if something goes wrong. They'll at least kind of respond to you and kind of give you some explanations of what happened, why it happened, and things like that. So that's a good tool to take a look at as well. And then, as I mentioned, a lot of the contractors are licensed with the Department of Labor Licensing and Regulation, and I've got a link to their lookup page here. So I'll just click that real quick. And so you should be able to just kind of click in there, and then you'll kind of pick whatever type of business it is. So in this case, contractors, and you'd hit select there, and then you'd put in the company name and all the details there. Or, I believe it just will allow you to search if you just put the name in too, and you can hit find. But if you know the city and things like that, you can go ahead and put that in. But again, those are all good resources to at least have those links ahead of time and kind of know where you'll look if you've got a business that you're not that familiar with and you want to check up and kind of see who they are and things like that. All right, so kind of getting back into the swing of things to talk about with potential contractors, kind of just remind folks to kind of beware of some of the things that come up from time to time after something like this. One of the things that we hear about, with some of these scams involving, fake contractors and things like that that come up after an emergency, as they may come door to door and they're telling people they can give them a discounted deal. They'll say they have leftover materials maybe from another job or something like that. So just kind of beware of things like that whenever somebody's coming, especially to your home, kind of out of the blue after an emergency situation like this. And anytime anybody's asking you or pressuring you to act quickly, just kind of know that that's one of those warning signs as well. I always tell folks you don't want to make rash decisions. So if somebody's pressuring you a little bit, to act faster than you want to act, you can always kind of take a step back and remember you don't have to hire that person. So that's always kind of a warning sign to watch out for there as well. And also just kind of beware anytime anybody's wanting you to, send cash, wire money. I'd also kind of throw in cryptocurrency, gift cards, those types of things in there too as well. But just kind of keep an eye out for those types of things. And one of the good things to remember is if you need financing, you can always use a bank or a lender that you trust, somebody that you're using already. So, maybe not doing all those financing with all these companies that you're not that familiar with and you don't really know how they operate. Maybe you're being a little bit rushed and you're not quite understanding the contracts that they have. You can always go to your bank or those lenders that you trust. And a lot of times you can find all that information on your website and deal with that, or on that bank financial institution's website. And I kind of mentioned this a little bit here just a second ago, but if you're doing a contract with somebody, you want to make sure that you read and you understand everything in those contracts before you sign it. Again, you don't want to just take somebody else's word for it. So if you have questions about anything that's in the contract, you want to go ahead and get all of those out of the way and make sure you understand everything before you sign it. And of course, you don't want to start work until you've signed a contract. So if something goes wrong and you don't have a contract, it's going to be your word against theirs. So those written contracts give you a protection, kind of set up to protect hopefully you and the business. So, if those disputes come up and everything's in writing, you've got it right there and you can both look at it and hopefully it'll clear up any of those things that happen. And I don't have this point on my slide, but I have it on my notes here where, kind of said it a second ago too, but, it's a good reminder that it is your money and it's up to you to decide how you spend it and who you hire and all that. So, if you're not comfortable with any of those things that come up, don't hire that person. You can go somebody else. And of course, you always want to watch out how you pay and things like that. Kind of our best advice is you don't want to pay in full up front, right? You don't want to give all that money right away to somebody because you don't know if they're going to do a good job or even finish the job sometimes, depending on what the circumstance is. So you want to hold up on that. You want to make sure that the work is done and you're satisfied with it before you make that final payment. And of course, you can always shop around for financing, compare loan terms and that type of stuff. I know I've had to do this recently with some work at my home, and you can go to a lot of different banking websites and look at a lot of the different financing options different contractors may have, things like that too. So you can take a look at a lot of different information and kind of see what works best for you and kind of what the best situation is and kind of go from there with all of that. But you want to make sure you're comparing all those terms before you make a decision. And like we said, cash may not always be the best option. We generally try to tell people those, cash may not be the best thing because there's no record of it. So keep that in mind whenever you're hiring a contract. And of course, we always encourage folks to beware of, paying with gift cards, reloadable credit cards, those types of things as well, cryptocurrency. I haven't ever heard of a situation where legitimate contractors has to be paid with cryptocurrency. So that would be kind of a giant warning, a red flag with me. So, those things that are kind of your normal ways of paying with these are going to be kind of your best method. So you can either do check with a lot of contractors or you can do a credit card, but you want to do those methods that, you've got a good record of who you paid and when you paid it. All right, we're going to get into imposter scams here in a second. I see, looks like we've got these. All right, so we've answered some of the things that have already come up. So I was clicking there in that question box. So we'll kind of get started now into our imposter scams and things that kind of come up whenever these emergency situations, happen. Kind of one of the things that we know happens not just during emergencies, but we know imposter scams and spoofing happen all of the time. And the scammers love to pretend to be government agencies, charities, businesses, all of those types of things. We always tell people they pretend to be somebody that you know and somebody you trust. But especially in an emergency situation, they'll pretend to be utilities, government agencies, those type of things, especially like FEMA and things like that. And again, scammers are always spoofing in any way they can. So that may be fake profiles on social media, phone numbers, email addresses, text messages, the list kind of goes on. I always tell people any way that we're communicating, scammers are doing those same things as well. So they're spoofing and pretending to be other people and doing all those things to try to trick you. So just kind of keep that in mind, not just during an emergency, but year round, really. And one of the things to keep in mind are some of these fake insurance claims that may come up after an emergency. So if you're getting a phone call about an insurance claim or a policy, you don't want to give out all your personal information or any of those details to somebody, especially making payments, anything like that, until you can verify that that caller is actually who they claim to be. Like I said, when I had issues with my home, I had one particular claim agent who always was the same person calling me. So that was, very helpful. Once I got his name and his phone number from my insurance agent, I had the same claim adjuster every time. So he had all of those details. He always had my account number, things like that, knew my claim numbers and all of those things. So, make sure that you have all that information. You can verify who they really are before you start giving them any of those details. And always remember, you can hang up if somebody's kind of making you uncomfortable with the type of information they're asking about. You can hang up, call your insurance company directly, use those numbers on the statements, or if they have a claim policy phone number you're supposed to use, you can use those. And again, that link we gave you earlier in the webinar should be able to help you out, kind of find those if you don't know them already. FEMA scams do happen from time to time, like I said. Just things to keep in mind when these types of situations come up. FEMA's not going to charge you for an application fee. So if somebody's telling you you got to pay to apply for, FEMA assistance, that's not the way it works. Let me tell you that we met with a lot of the FEMA folks right after Helene, and they, were in person at a lot of these response centers. And I can tell you they did all those applications for free and met with folks for free and weren't asking for any kind of money up front for folks. So they are not going to do that. And they're not going to ask for your social security number as well when they're talking to you, especially on the phone. And again, somebody's telling you they want money to help you qualify for FEMA. That's a scam. Don't give them any money. Utility scams, they do come up from time to time after these things, especially when there's kind of long stretched power outages. That's not just, hurricane or tropical storm. We've had some of those with some of these ice storms, things like that, or just in these situations where power may be out for an extended amount of time. If somebody's calling you, asking you for bank information, that would be one big red flag, but especially if they're telling you they're going to kind of reimburse you for a loss of service. So they want your bank info to give you money for your service being out. And that's, I laugh because, our utilities just don't work that way. If they're actually your utility, they probably have an account with you already. And usually they would put some kind of refund on that account. So it's not just going to go into your bank automatically like that. Usually it would just go onto your billing cycle. So maybe your bill next month is a little bit lower or something like that. But they have all those details already. They know how you normally pay and all that. So they don't need to call you and ask you for a bank account. Sometimes they may call you and say there's a error and they need your personal information to restore service. Again, that's not kind of how they work. They already know your address and things like that. So they should be able to send somebody over and deal with that right away. They don't need your personal information, and they definitely will not call you out of the blue to kind of try to get that information from you. Anytime anybody's threatening you to, they say they're going to leave your utilities shut off until you pay, that's a big red flag. That's not how those utilities work. If you haven't been paying any of your bills, that already, and they probably gave you a shut off date. They have to give you written notices and things like that. So if there's an emergency situation, they're not going to call you and say you have to pay them some fee up front to restore service and things like that. So just kind of know that. And again, gift cards, cryptocurrency, wire transfer, utilities aren't going to ask you for those types of things. Again, you pay bills every month to that utility, so you've already got a way that you pay with them, and it's not through a gift card or cryptocurrency generally. So, anytime anybody's asking for those types of things with your utility, know that it is a red flag and it is definitely a scam. So those utilities are not going to ask you for that. So if you're like me, you already use their website or their app, so you go into that, and if you actually owe them money, you would pay that way. You're not going to send it to them through some unusual form of payment. And of course, with all of our spoofing scams, not just during emergencies, anytime somebody's calling you out of the blue and you feel like things aren't right, you can just hang up on them. You don't want to do that. You don't want to deal with those folks. You definitely don't want to give out insurance information or bank information to somebody who's calling you out of the blue, especially if they're asking you for type of unusual things. We always tell people too, you want to use those official websites, information is real. So if you're getting calls, especially about insurance or utilities, things like that, you can always hang up. Use those numbers on your utility statement, use that number that's on your insurance bill that you get. You always have kind of ways that you normally communicate with them. I know a lot of companies like for you to use those apps. So maybe go in the app and find the customer support numbers that way. Just kind of use those things that you normally communicate with through those companies and keep communicating that way. Don't rely on those phone calls that come to you kind of out of the blue. Of course, we always tell folks we may not know every scam that's out there, but the red flags of a lot of scams kind of have the same things that happen from time to time. They all have kind of the same red flags that happen. And kind of the big thing is they're going to pretend to be somebody somebody you recognize, somebody you trust. And they do that because they know it's more likely that you'll, answer that phone call, reply to that email, definitely with text messages. If you think it's some business that you're dealing with normally, you're more likely to respond to it or interact with it if you think it's somebody that you already know and recognize. So just kind of keep that in mind. They're trying to gain your trust, right? But then they're going to tell you there's a problem or a prize. Kind of with this situation, it's usually a problem. So they're going to tell you, they're not going to turn your power on unless you pay or something like that. So, just kind of know scammers try to get you worked up, think that there's some sort of other problem that's going to happen to you if you don't react the way they want you to. So they're trying to get you emotional and make you make decisions that you probably aren't kind of in the best state of mind to answer. And then they're going to try to make you act quickly, right? So they want you to act fast and they want you to act now, and they want you to do this without having a moment to think about what you're doing and talking to other people, or really having that moment to be like, this isn't right. This is a scam. So if somebody's pressuring you to act now, that's a big sign that it's a scam. And then they're going to tell you to pay in a specific way. Usually that's gift cards, credit, those ones that you reload, things like that, cryptocurrency especially. If somebody's telling you you have to go to a cryptocurrency ATM and put money into it for, responding to a specific situation, normally that's a scam. Most legitimate companies aren't sending you to a cryptocurrency ATM and then demanding that you give all those login information or those account details to them. So just kind of know scammers like those specific payments because they're hard to track down. And even if law enforcement can track them down, a lot of times by the time they do, that money's gone. It's kind of gone in the wind. It's as good as cash a lot of times. So once you give those codes over to somebody, that money is gone and different part of the country or a different part of the world a lot of times. So just kind of keep that in mind with those. And of course, we always kind of recommend some of our free tools that you can do to better protect yourself. Put multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication on all of your accounts, especially financial, insurance. If you're like me, I think my utility requires me to have two-factor on my phone whenever I try to log in. It sends me the text message, and then I have to put in the little code, and then I'm able to log into that utility account. So set those up on everything that you can. And we tell folks, the FBI has told us that it makes it twice as hard to get into your account. So even if a hacker has access to your password from one way or another, they're not able to get into that account because they don't have that additional thing that you've set up to get into those. So find something you're comfortable with. A lot of times, you just hold your face up and it will scan it up to your phone and it will let you into those accounts. But just set something up and take advantage of it. And again, it's going to make it twice as hard to get into your accounts. And on your financial accounts as well, kind of take a look at the account alerts that you're financial institutions may offer. A lot of times you can go in, you can set up, maybe it's a certain dollar amount. So if your bank account gets below a dollar amount, you get a text message about it that you have low funds, something like that. Or sometimes you can get alerts if, purchases are made with your credit card, any of those types of things. I always tell people kind of look through those, see what options your banks and your financial institutions offer, and set up all the alerts that kind of make sense for your life and what's going to work for you. They have a lot of different options available depending on who you bank with and kind of what works. So take a look at those. And we also encourage folks keeping an eye on your credit reports. So you want to go through those fairly regularly. Kind of the advice has always been at least once a year. But annualcreditreport.com will offer you a free credit report from each of the 3 major credit bureaus every week. So you can go through that and kind of see what's going on your credit reports. And you want to look to make sure everything's accurate and everything actually belongs to you. If you're seeing signs from, some accounts that you don't recognize, that might be the sign of identity theft. So that's kind of why we recommend that. And we tell folks to use annualcreditreport.com because it is authorized by federal law. Some accounts may be set up to get information about you or potentially steal your identity, depending on what sites you're going to. But just know annualcreditreport.com is the site that's kind of authorized by federal law, and they have certain rules and regulations that they're supposed to go through and follow. But again, it's going to give you access to Experian, TransUnion, Equifax, and you can go through those and make sure that everything on those accounts, is accurate and that it actually belongs to you. If you're seeing signs of, potential identity theft, you can place a fraud alert. You'll just need to get in touch with one of the credit bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, or Equifax, and then they'll notify the other 2. And the fraud alert's basically going to go into place. It will last for a year. You can extend it longer than that if you need to, if there are signs of identity theft going on. But it's going to alert businesses that something's happened and they need to take additional steps to kind of verify your identity and make sure that it really is you applying for whatever type of credit that account belongs to. And another great tool that I recommend everybody do, place a security freeze on your credit reports. So this is different than, blocking your credit card or anything like that. We're talking about putting a freeze on your credit reports. So you go to Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. You can do that on their websites or giving them a call if that's what you prefer. But within an hour, they can have that freeze in place, and they can lift it too as well for free. Basically, what that's going to do is going to lock your credit reports and your files. So nobody's going to be able to open up new accounts in your name. So if you, are looking to get a credit card or anything like that, you wouldn't need to thaw it while you're putting those applications in, but it's a great tool. I always use the credit card example because that's one that's happened to me. I had somebody try to open up a credit card in my name. Luckily, I had a freeze on my accounts, and I got a notice from, I believe it was Experian. It was one of them, but I got that email notice from them, said, this credit card was applied for. If it was you, you need to thaw your account. But if it wasn't you, here's some things you need to keep in mind. So, it's a great tool. In my case, it really helped stop somebody else from taking advantage of my information and opening up that credit card in my name. So, any of those things that you can do to protect yourself, this is a great tool. And again, it will kind of help you manage that and prevent other people from using your information, because we all know, especially with security breaches and things like that, a lot of our details are out there and people have access to those, key things that can be used to create accounts in your name. So just kind of keep that in mind, and it's a great resource. Like I said, if you do find yourself in a situation where you need to get a new loan or a new credit card, or, I had to thaw mine a few weeks ago and I got a new credit or a new internet provider. So, they wanted to do that credit report check before they sent me that device to be able to log in with their service. So, when I did that, I had to go thaw my credit reports. So that was easy to do. You just go back onto the websites for Experian, TransUnion, Equifax, you thaw it. It's just a click of a button, and within an hour, they'll have that thawed for you. You can put in those applications. And once it's done, you can freeze it again. A lot of them have a little tool where you can even set a date and time and stuff where you want that freeze to go back in place. So that's a great tool to take advantage of. And of course, if you think you're a victim of identity theft, you can contact SCDCA. We have an identity theft unit who can kind of go through our checklist of different things you might need to do, and they can walk you through that and kind of help you minimize some of the damage that can happen with identity theft. You can go to consumer.sc.gov, click that little How Do I button, It'll show you report identity theft, and you can also report a scam there as well. And if you want some of our free publications, we have those available on our website. You can download them or you can request physical copies. We've got the ones you see there: Ditch the Pitch, ID Theft Prevention Guide, our Credit Report Guide, and also kind of just want to remind you that our Recovering from a Disaster and our Beware of Disaster Scam publications are on that list too on our website. So you can either take a look at them online there, or you can download them, or you can kind of request those physical copies, and all of that is free. And we'll ship them to wherever you need to go. And even if you have a community group that needs, multiple copies of those publications, you can kind of fill out that form on our website and let us know how many you need, and we'll ship them to you. Like I said, we've got Wednesday webinars every week, usually at 10:30. All the ones we've got coming up are all 10:30. But you can click the little link there if you've downloaded the PDF, and you'll be able to get to those registration links. We also have them on our website, consumer.sc.gov, and we also send reminders out every week as well. So if you've signed up for our reminders, you'll get a message about those every week about which ones we've got coming up. But next Wednesday, we'll talk about text message scams. So we're going to look at some of the 5 most common scams reported to the Federal Trade Commission last year, kind of the warning signs of those scams, what to watch out for, and things like that with each of those text message scams that we're all kind of getting bombarded with these days. Wednesday, May 21st, we will talk about guard your wallet on the road. So we know travel season's coming up. A lot of us will be out traveling for Memorial Day or, throughout the summer. So we're going to give you a few tips on some things you might want to do to kind of protect yourself as you're out traveling this summer. And then on Wednesday, May 28th, we'll be discussing job scams. We know a lot of people may be looking for either additional summer work or kind of looking at changing careers potentially, but there are a lot of scams that are out there targeting folks who are in the market for a new career. And we'll kind of give you some advice of things to watch out for if that's something that you are considering. And of course, connect with us on social media. Our Facebook has a lot of good information, as well as our X account. And if you've not checked out YouTube, please do so. SCDCA TV is where you'll find us on YouTube. We put a lot of our webinars there. So if there was a topic you want to either go back and revisit, or maybe you missed a Wednesday webinar and want to find out more information about that, you can find all of those on our YouTube page. So that's a good resource to take advantage of. And as we get kind of wrapping up here, I'm going to take a look to see if I missed any questions. So let me find my little button here. It moved on me. All right. All right. We had a couple of questions kind of very specific to insurance, and, kind of with some of that about adjusters and their property. That might be a little bit more in line with the South Carolina Department of Insurance. So I'd kind of encourage you, all those links that we had at the top, they've got a great deal of information, and I wouldn't want to get into something that's really covered by their agency. So I'd kind of encourage you to go through a lot of those links that we provided at the beginning of the webinar. Again, that's the South Carolina Department of Insurance. They have a great deal of information on their website as well about all of the requirements for the insurance companies and things like that. And they also have kind of processes of things that you can do if you aren't too happy with the action of an insurance company. You can go in through there too as well and take a look at that. There was also a question about some of the contractors insurance as well. I'd kind of say too with that may be a little bit better directed with the Department of Labor Licensing and Regulation. They kind of oversee that type of information in our state. And like I said, they have a great deal of information on their website as well when it comes to things like that with hiring a contractor and that type of stuff. So that would be a great resource as well. And again, we have that link there. And also on our website, under our background of business, we have those details as well there. So that would be something that you could take advantage of. And I'm going to see if, my screen just went black there. I was hoping I could click on that page and get you back to that so you could see how that looked. But my PowerPoint does not want to cooperate with me there. Let me see if I can click back to that. So this was the Department of Insurance. So if you click that, it's doi.sc.gov. So that's going to give you a lot of information. As you can see, they've got some of their news releases up there. And then they have a complaint section here. Their locate insurance, which was one of the ones that we mentioned. So that's great as well. And then I believe, if I remember right, it seems like I saw a bunch of the stuff on the front page about the hurricane preps, but we also have that link on our PDF as well. So that would be a great tool to take advantage of. And we'll try to show you again real quick the little background of business page on our site. That was something else that's great. So even if you don't find that right away, you can take a look at our website, consumer.sc.gov, and then a little background business section there, and you can find all those details about connecting with a lot of different state agencies. And that's under that little consumer resources tab there. And then you'll see background of business. So if you didn't have that direct link, you'll go to consumer resources and then background of business. And hopefully that will get you where you need to go. And like I tell folks, you can always let us know and we can check in and see if there's something else we can help you with if you need to chat with us about it. All right, it looks like that should be the last of our questions. And I want to just kind of tell you too, if you need to get a hold of us, something else comes to mind that you would like to ask, you can shoot me that question. We'll get you either an answer or find you to the, state agency that kind of is better suited to answer some of those questions sometimes, but we can get you at least pointed in the right direction. If you get our emails about our webinar notices, you can reply to that as well. It's that public information email address. I get those. So if you reply to that, I'll be able to get that as well. So feel free to shoot me a call or email, and we'll try our best to get you any of those answers to things that we may not have discussed during the webinar. And with that, I'll get you wrapped up, and we hope you can join us next time for another one of our Wednesday webinars. And we will see you then. We hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you, guys.